Welcome to California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. I am glad you are with us. Over this half hour, we'll be speaking with Mark Rocha. He is the president of Pasadena City College, one of the largest community colleges in California, 27,000 students. And I think it's fair to say one of the most respected community colleges in our great state. Over this half hour, we'll be speaking with Mr. Rocha, Dr. Rocha, I should say, about his rise through education. We'll also be speaking about the challenges facing community colleges in our state. They are great and dramatic. And sir, I thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. I mentioned to you I had been a lawyer and I got my start as a journalist at KPCC, which is an NPR affiliate, and PCC stands for Pasadena City College.
We're the PCC and
You
KPCC.
are. And so I thank you for that. I want to start with your early history. I know that your grandparents are from Puerto Rico and Colombia. Your parents were born in New York City, the South Bronx, as you were. And I think it's fair to say that you are a classic immigrant success story.
Yeah, well, it's our family, my family has lived the American dream. And the fact that I'm talking to you today as a college president, I was a kid born in the South Bronx, and neither my dad or my mom ever finished high school, and so. And
you got your PhD.
But they were always, you got to go to school, you got to go to college. My mother, from the very first,
From the beginning.
From the beginning.
That ethic was there.
That's right.
And so you ultimately got your bachelor's at Villanova.
Yep.
You proceeded to get your master's at Cal State Fullerton. And you got your PhD at USC, studying English the whole time. What's remarkable is while you were getting all these advanced degrees, you were a junior high school teacher.
Yeah, well, I studied to become a high school teacher, an English teacher by trade. I got my English credential, and I came out to California to look for work. California was growing at the time,
course,
the
this
late
was in
70s.
the late 70s, of course.
And I was fortunate and got my went to Fullerton Unified, and I started out as a junior high school teacher. And from there was able to go to graduate school part-time at Cal State Fullerton. So the other part of my story is I'm really a beneficiary of the public school system and the public higher education system in California, but for which, again, I wouldn't have been able to do what I've done.
And sadly, many of our students are facing challenges as they choose where to go to university. When you look at public schools in our state, higher education, they are becoming, for better or for worse, cost prohibitive.
Yeah, well, you know, I always, let's put it this way in just kind of plain English. I remember when I was teaching, and I walked over to Cal State Fullerton. I wanted to get my master's degree, and I said, well, where, you know, I'd like to sign up. And they said, okay, you just go over that building, go in that window, and so on. They signed me right up, and I paid $177. And
this is not that long ago.
No questions.
This is not that long ago.
1983. So, this generation of students doesn't have that opportunity.
Such luck. Now, ultimately, though, after you got your PhD, you decided to start teaching at the four-year level. Yeah. And you went to CSUN. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, so I know CSUN well, an English professor. But ultimately, you took a path in administration, and you became an associate dean at CSUN. What made you take that path? I mean, there are those that they want to be college professors, and that's that. And that's noble and wonderful. It's also noble and wonderful to be an administrator, but what made you choose administration?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people say that I took the wrong turn there.
The wrong turn? Okay, you never know.
But I haven't regretted it. Actually, it's one of those accidents, you know, one of those twists of fate. There was the previous associate dean had left to take another job, and my dean said, well, we just need a short-term replacement.
Oops.
And so would you mind stepping in? And I said, well, of course. And so it was kind of accidental. That was in the fall of '93. January 17th of '94.
I know what you're going to say.
The earthquake.
It's called the Northridge earthquake.
So
I was living in Encino.
There you go.
Right down the road from Northridge. So
we were in Quonset huts set up by the National Guard, and my dean came in into the tent one morning and said, "You're now the associate dean."
And you couldn't say no. I mean, at that point, it was impossible. How severely was CSUN damaged in '94?
Well, it put out of use every building on campus.
Wow.
Every building on campus. And so I remember, you know, you talk about a crisis. I remember we literally had to order thousands and thousands of trailers, and we pulled them onto the fields in the rain so that we could get classes going. And probably my best achievement with my colleagues ever in my career was that we were able to reopen that college in 27 days.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. You stayed there for a couple of years, and then you moved on to Cal State Humboldt in
Yep.
Northern California.
Humboldt State.
Yeah, you became Humboldt State. You became a dean there. You moved on. You went back east to Seton Hall in New Jersey, became a provost, and then you took a break.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the break that you took in 2000.
Well, I went into, this was the high moment of for-profit and education, and a lot of educational companies were growing at the time. Of course, this was also, you know, an opportunity for me to learn a different aspect of the business, and so I spent a number of years as an accreditation consultant and working with in private industry and private education. Learned a great deal. It's a very different thing working for stockholders as opposed to stakeholders.
So what made you decide to return to traditional nonprofit education, which you did in 2006, becoming the president of West Los Angeles Community College?
Yeah. Well, it's stockholders versus stakeholders. It's
it.
the mission. In community colleges, you are dealing right with the mission of access to quality public higher education for a lot of people normally wouldn't have it.
And let's talk about that, because your path had been traditional four-year institutions. But when you returned to the public sector, you went with a community college. What drew you to that model?
I think it's the teaching, and I think a lot of my colleagues who are faculty who could teach anywhere, could teach in four-year. The big distinction between four-year, which wonderful institutions, is that in community colleges the emphasis is on teaching, and
as opposed to research.
As opposed to research and publications and other kinds of activity. All, you know, all very good things, but here the emphasis is on the development of the individual student. We have commencement tomorrow, and we have so many stories of students who are succeeding, transferring on to wonderful schools, who wouldn't have been able to do that but for our faculty, but for our teachers. So that's the difference.
Now, I think it's fair to say West LA, while a fine institution, PCC is one of the premier community colleges in our state, and you quickly nabbed the presidency in 2009. It's been a few years. How has that been? I mean, that was quite a move for you.
Yeah. Well, that probably was the biggest adjustment. West LA was 10,000 students, and PCC is about 27,000 students. And so getting your arms around a college that large is a challenge. And the other difference, though, is the history. You know, West LA was founded in 1969 in that great kind of upsurge of community colleges throughout the state. PCC has been there since 1924.
Yeah,
and
it
so
is legendary.
Such a rich past. So that's an asset. All those things are assets, and then of course the size of the institution, the academic reputation. So it's been a real pleasure serving the college.
So when we come back, I want to speak with you about challenges facing community colleges generally. We know there are challenges with matriculation to four-year institutions. We know there are challenges with regard to the fees being charged the students, and we know there are general challenges with budgetary issues because of where we are in the state of California. His name is Dr. Mark Rocha. My name is Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on California Edition. Welcome back to California Edition. Our guest, Dr. Mark Rocha, president of Pasadena Community College. And I want to digress briefly and ask you about an investigation that was recently launched. I know you can't say much, it's ongoing, but we do know that two senior executives at PCC have been accused of impropriety. They're being accused of taking kickbacks in relation to contracts, facilities contracts. Talk to us about how that hit you, how that hit the college, how you're persevering through this challenge.
No, I appreciate the question
Please.
and the opportunity to respond. We received a body blow. We were informed by the district attorney that two of our employees, two of our administrators, were being investigated for serious, serious crimes. Now, obviously, I have no understanding of whether they're innocent or guilty,
right.
and that's not for me to determine.
Of course.
But if they are found to have done what they're accused of doing, these are the most serious crimes imaginable, which have to do with doing things you're not supposed to do as a public employee.
Right. I mean, literally taking kickbacks from vendors. I'll give you this contract if you send me on a trip, if you pay me extra money under the table.
And that's what they're investigating. We, of course, are cooperating fully with the district attorney and have completely opened up the college to the district attorney's investigation. We'll continue to do so until the matter is concluded. I do want to also assure the community we serve that we've also taken vigorous steps. Pardon me. One is certainly we are doing our own investigation.
Right.
I will soon be recommending actions to the board about these two individuals. And more than that, though, we have brought in a new independent team of accountants who are doing a complete audit and also a complete reorganization of our accounting and fiscal and business operations. So we're moving forward. Now you asked the question about the emotional landscape.
Right, the mood.
The emotional landscape. And I don't know any other way to say it except that I think that my colleagues and I just feel shocked and angered and saddened. And when this first comes in, you just deal with it that way. And we've been doing some crying.
And it's particularly painful when you consider that in 2011, 2012, the California community colleges saw the steepest hike in the nation when it relates to fees being charged to students.
That's right.
So why don't we move on and talk
Sure.
about that, because it is for some very, very difficult.
Right.
We know over the summer of 2012 that per unit fees went up from $36 to $46, and it had been $26 a year ago.
Sure.
That's rough for so many.
Well, not too long ago, it was free.
Well, there you have it.
And that was really the mission and the promise of community college, that no matter what your means, no matter what your walk of life, you could drive on to our campus or any community college and start your college education. Those days, sadly, are over because of the state budget crisis, which is ongoing. Students are adapting. Obviously, we've had to make some difficult decisions about priorities.
Right.
And now we're focusing on the priority of transfer. We're not offering as many classes as we used to offer, and the ones that we are offering are classes that are the so-called core classes that students need to get their general education requirements and move on.
Is PCC offering enough sections of those classes? Because what we are hearing is that at many institutions, it's virtually impossible to get the classes you need to matriculate to CSU or UC within that 2-year time frame for those that are striving to make that 2-year time frame.
Sure. The short, honest answer to your question is no. The students are not getting the sections they need. Chancellor Jack Scott, the chancellor of our state,
who had been
college system,
PCC president,
former PCC president, has said many times that each year, that last year, over 100,000 students were shut out of community colleges because of these budget cuts.
We also know that what some students will try to do to speed up the process for those that want to transfer quickly is take classes over the summer. But over the last 2 summers, classes have literally been eliminated completely at some institutions or cut by a third, a half. How is PCC handling the summer issue?
Well, we're hanging on by a thread
Do you offer summer courses?
We are offering summer classes that start on June 25th. But you're quite right, not as many as we offered last year or the year before that. We also have a winter session, and we'll be offering classes, but it will be not as many as the previous year. So it's tough.
I want to ask about a formula that was proposed by one of your sister colleges, and that is Santa Monica College.
Sure.
For better or for worse, they were attempting to think out of the box.
Sure.
And they had proposed a plan whereby students could pay, instead of $46 a unit, $180 a unit.
Right.
And if they were willing to pay that higher rate, they could get the core classes that they need.
Right.
It caused a huge uproar. Jack Scott, you mentioned, was apoplectic. Even the California Attorney General came out, and she said she thought it was violative of the education code.
Right.
Putting aside that, what do you make of Santa Monica's attempt to think out of the box?
Sure.
To attempt a new solution, a new formula?
Well, I know the Santa Monica proposal well, and I know the president of Santa Monica College, and I absolutely understand the motive, which was good. But I want to be frank and say that I disagree with the result. In other words, going to two-tier.
Oh, I understand. Yes.
Going to two-tier fees, even if people are willing to pay them, goes to the heart of our mission as community colleges, which is basically, used to be, free for all.
Right.
Okay, so that anyone could have the opportunity to come in. And so one of my problems with it, although I understand the motive, one of my problems with it is then you get into the business of having to make selections. Who gets the class? Who gets to pay? And so on. When the principle of community college is anyone who drives onto your campus ought to be able to have the same opportunity.
Now, here's another challenge as I see it. I mentioned earlier that California had the steepest hike in the nation in the past academic year. But as it relates to community colleges, California's fees are 50th out of 50.
Right.
It's one place where it's nice to be 50th out of 50,
Yeah.
significantly below the national average. So if I'm a legislator in Sacramento and I'm trying to close a budget deficit and I see that we are significantly below the national average when it comes to community college fees, I say let's raise those fees.
Well, it's it sounds like a reasonable argument on its face.
I can imagine.
But $50 fees for a student, and then you add books, comes to about $3,000 a year. So $3,000 a year for most of our students might as well be $3 million a year.
It's so sad to hear that.
And the thing that I try and go around and make the case for is that the economic research is absolutely clear, and we seem to have lost our heads, that if you invest $1 in community colleges, $1 in public higher education, it comes back as $4 as benefit to the economy. We're going to need 10 million more college graduates by the year 2020, or else California's economy is going to sink even more. And the only way that we can get that is to invest in our young people.
So why don't we talk about that investment
Sure.
when we come back? And I want to speak with you about an initiative that will be on the ballot in November that looks to invest more of California's dollars in education, both K-12, K-14, and higher ed. We're speaking with Mark Rocha. He is the president of Pasadena City College. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Dr. Mark Rocha. He is the president of Pasadena City College, and I want to speak with you about funding formulas in our state. As you know, since the recession 2009, community colleges have lost about 13% funding over the last few years. Last year, over $500 million. How much was Pasadena City College impacted by the budget cuts of this last fiscal year?
Right. In the fiscal year that we're in now, we lost $10 million.
And how big is that?
Well, we started when this economic crisis started back in 2007. Our annual budget was about $130 million for about 30,000 students. Today, it is about $105 million. So we've lost about $25 million in funding over the last few years.
Now let's look forward. As
Sure.
we know, the state recently passed a budget, and the way the governor set up the formula was there would be no immediate cuts to public education, K-12, K-14, in anticipation of the passage of an initiative in November that would increase sales tax by a quarter cent for 4 years, increase income taxes on the wealthy for 7 years. Let's talk in the negative. If the initiative does not pass, what happens?
We will lose $6 million in additional cuts next year, which will be a pretty difficult blow.
So that gets you below a $100 million budget.
Yes,
For the first time in years, I would presume.
And then, of course, on top of that, the state is deferring its payments. This is your budget, but it's supposed to make regular payments to the community colleges, and so those payments are deferred. So not only do you have a budget problem, you have a cash flow problem.
And as I understand it, you need to budget in such a way that presumes defeat of the initiative.
Well, we've had to budget the cut because if the initiative were not to pass, we would have very little ability in the middle of a fiscal year to make a cut that large.
Now, your colleagues at the CSU system are taking an even bolder and stronger, and some would argue draconian step. They have announced that for applicants in the fall of 2012, they're going to waitlist everyone until they find out what happens with the initiative. Because if the initiative does not pass, they will decrease enrollment, and there is discussion of closing some campuses.
Right, and that's killing our students. Our students who are going through PCC right now are working in our college so that they can get seats in those CSU colleges. So for CSU to essentially shut its door because of the fiscal crisis, and I understand the actions they have to take, it's just, imagine if you're 19, 20 years old and you're trying to make your way through this system.
What's interesting about this process is I've spoken with college presidents for many years, and generally speaking, the desire is to remain apolitical. You don't want to get involved in the political process. But nowadays, college presidents are being forced to take positions on items like tax initiatives. I mean, you have come out strongly in favor of Governor Brown's tax initiative.
Oh, I am absolutely for it. I'm on the campaign trail now for the tax initiative, but I want to make clear to the community that we serve that my campaign is not for please give my college and other colleges more money, but that the tax initiative is the beginning of the reinvestment in California's economy. California, since 1959, has depended for the prosperity in its economy on the California Master Plan of Higher Education.
But that master plan has really been turned upside down. And when you think about the amount of money we were spending when the master plan was passed in 1960 versus education versus prisons, I'm just giving facts, not taking a position. It's turned upside down. We're now spending more on prisons than we are on education.
That's right, and that's an indication of our values. There's an old Chinese proverb that says, no matter how far down the wrong road you've gone, turn back. Okay, so my message to my friends and neighbors, to everyone in the community that we serve, is the answer is turn back from this wrong road. When we invested in education, the economy grew, and there's a connection there.
Here's the challenge I think the proponents of Governor Brown's initiative face. We look at the recent June election, and on the ballot was an initiative to increase taxes on cigarettes, $1 a pack. Heading into the polls, it was leading with 60%. As we speak today, it appears it will be defeated. If California is not willing to pass a sin tax on cigarette smokers, of which I think only 12% are in our state, Do you see Californians taxing themselves? Every single one of us, we all pay sales tax.
Yeah, I do, because the stakes are different. Certainly the cigarette tax, and we know that the cigarette companies got out in front, fully funded the opposition, and kind of defined the message there. Here, this is everyone's message.
But couldn't one argue that that could happen again with regard to Governor Brown's initiative? I regularly interview
Sure.
Republican members of the state assembly and the state senate. They've come out very strongly against Governor Brown's initiative.
There will be principled opposition, but again, what I think the differences are that the cigarette tax was, okay, this will develop a little extra revenue. The stakes in the tax initiative for education are about the prosperity of the economy. We're beginning, hopefully, to improve the economy a little bit. The employment picture is looking a little bit better. If we give our young people hope by giving them the seats in schools that this tax initiative will make possible, I know that the economy will improve even more.
When we began our conversation, you had mentioned to me that you descend from Puerto Ricans and Colombians. And I think about the wonderfully diverse community that we live in, a large Latino population. Sadly, studies have come out recently which indicate that Latinos are not excelling at the same rate as their counterparts. The college transfer rate for Latinos in California is about half that of their Caucasian counterparts. I know you are the president for all students,
Sure.
but as a Latino man yourself,
Sure.
I got to think that's particularly troubling.
Sure, it is. And there is an achievement gap for students of color, Black and Latino students, in the community colleges. And I think we're working on it, and it exists for a couple of reasons. Number one, there are language differences. Okay, and so when they get to community college, they have to take the battery of tests and English composition and so on. And
But what a failure of the system if they had graduated from high school that they should have a language barrier. I mean,
Yeah.
I think bilingualism is a wonderful thing, but you would think.
Well, it may be, and certainly it may be a breakdown in the system, but I see it more as the challenge that people from the Latino community, young people from the Latino community, are going to in their neighborhoods as they come out to college, which is a completely different environment. They have challenges all up and down the line. They have challenges with finances. They have challenges with their families. Oftentimes, they're the first person in their family to go to college. So I think that one of the things that we're trying to do, and it's hopeful, our transfers are up dramatically. And our transfers for our Black and Latino students are up significantly.
You beat the state average.
At PCC by a significant margin. But that's because our Board of Trustees and our faculty have been putting the additional kinds of support we need for those students to succeed.
Dr. Mark Rocha, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a very informative conversation, and we appreciate what you're doing for the students of the entire San Gabriel Valley. His name is Dr. Mark Rocha. He is the president of Pasadena Community College. My name is Brad Pomerance. We thank you so much for watching California Edition.